Hey guys, it's Macias again, welcoming you back to another wonderful video lecture. I know this is your favorite part of the class. I know you live for the next edition of these video lectures. Please hold your applause and your enthusiasm. I can't take it. All right, all kidding aside, let's get down to business, guys. All right, so we got, beginning of the Industrial Revolution. As with all the video lectures, you get to control the pace. So if you need to stop and catch up on taking your notes, you get to do that. Now, there are some videos within the video on here, so but they're short, much shorter than the ones we dealt with on Enlightenment. But there will be some additional commentary that I have for you guys regarding the videos. So make sure you play through them. You'll have to watch them probably at least one more time to get the information that I want you to get out of them. All right, so let's get started. And as usual, I will pause briefly at the end of each slide so that you can stop the video and catch up on your writing. All right, so beginning of Industrial Revolution. Let's get going. All right, so this will be our really our operative definition of the Industrial Revolution, and make sure it is emphasized in your notes because it will it's guaranteed to be on your test. All right, so the Industrial Revolution refers to the greatly increased output of machined goods begun in England in the 1750s and soon spread to continental Europe and North America. Machined goods simply means that they were products, whether it be clothing, whether it be tools, whether it be furniture, whatever it was, goods that were created and put together by machines. That's what machined goods means. Products created by machines. Now, before we can jump too far into the Industrial Revolution, we have to talk about what's known as the Agricultural Revolution. Okay? The Agricultural Revolution had its start way back in the 1600s and going into the early and mid 1700s. Now, prior to 1700, farming stunk, literally and figuratively. It was hard work, hard life. People, for the most part, were only able to grow enough food to keep them and their families alive, and sometimes with bad luck and bad harvests, not even that. So people did starve a lot. They tried to divide their fields into different strips of land, but there were no fences, so people's land bled into each other, and sometimes that created conflict. But more often, all it simply meant was that animals got to roam kind of free. They would trample through cropland, destroy crops. They would eat up the food. There was no way to stop them. There were no fences. And another big thing was that disease spread quickly amongst the animals, and so entire herds of livestock could be lost. So it was pretty rough going being a farmer before the 1700s, before the Agricultural Revolution. Now, once the Agricultural Revolution kicked in, which we'll talk more about that in a second, but this is how farm life was. It was all day, and it was every day, and it was hard work. In this particular picture, they are harvesting wheat. Wheat, as we know, is turned into bread. All right, so what was the big thing with the Agricultural Revolution? Well, first of all, we need to talk about enclosures. All right, enclosures is where fences come into play. And what happened is landowners, farm owners, they started fencing off their land. Genius idea, right? Okay, they started fencing off large areas of their land so that it would keep the animals that they wanted to keep in, it would keep other people and animals they didn't want out, and it provided some very visible and noticeable barriers for people's land so that everybody knew what they had. What this allowed farmers to do was experiment with new agricultural methods. Because if they tried one thing on their own land, they didn't have to risk it harming a neighbor's land, and then there would be conflict. Also, since they had their own lands fenced off, they could further fence up their own lands to create different areas. And this way, they could experiment with one new farming method in one part of their land without it affecting other parts of the land. One big problem for the smaller farmers, though, was that they became tenant farmers. And tenant farming meant that you didn't own the land, but you farmed the land for somebody else. And then the way you paid rent was you had to give a portion of your crop, usually a very large portion, to the landowner. And then the landowner would make a bunch of money off the crop. You were usually only left with enough for you to survive, maybe a tiny bit to sell so that you could buy additional tools. So being a tenant farmer wasn't really all that great. It gave you a place to live on. It gave you kind of a job, but it was not a great way to go. And eventually a lot of tenant farmers ended up giving up farming because it just wasn't doing it for them, and they moved to the cities. But that's for later. Those of you that have been in planes and flown over any chunks of land, you'll see all these strips of land broken up into big squares, big rectangles, little rectangles, enclosures. Those were all enclosures. They've been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years, and some of these fences are not made of wood or stone or anything like that. Sometimes the fences themselves are made out of bushes. People grow bushes in a line. The bushes grow, they turn into a natural fence. In Europe, some of those fences are decades and sometimes even hundreds of years old. So enclosures was a pretty big deal and a very permanent deal. Now, what else did the agricultural revolution bring us? They brought us some scientific advancements in growing food. Faster ways, better ways to grow food, to grow more food. One of those scientists was a guy named Jethro Tull. He created a machine called a seed drill. And what it did is it helped to space out crops better so that the same bunch of plants wouldn't use up all the space and grow into each other and steal each other's nutrients, and then you have a bad crop. The even spacing for plants allowed for more plants to grow and become very lush plants. So overall, it boosted crop growth, and this kick-started a cyclical effect, which meant that since there were more and better crops, this meant more food for animals that could eat some of those crops. The animals procreated. They had more animals. The animals got bigger. They got stronger, which meant that not only could they live longer, you could get more out of the animals, but yes, you guessed it, they created more poo, which meant more fertilizer. The fertilizer could be plowed into the soil, creating richer soil, better soil for the crops, and we start the whole thing over again. Okay, so agricultural revolution already making an impact with bigger and better animals, producing more manure, gets plowed into the ground, and you get better crops. There's a picture there of a very basic seed drill, and well, actually this was one of the more advanced models, but that is what a seed drill used to look like. All right, let's take a look at crop rotation. Now, crop rotation was not really a scientific advancement, but it was a different way of doing things. It was a different way of planting crops so that you didn't use up all the nutrients in the soil and then have bad soil for any more crops. What you did was that you split up your farmland into different sections. You grew different crops on different sections Some crops would actually help replenish nutrients in the soil, and then the next year you move that crop to a different part of your land, and you grow something else that's needed on the land that now has better nutrients. So this was done all the time with lots of different farmers, and what it created great farmland that you could use over and over and over again all year round. Now, some of the crops that were grown had other specific purposes, such as turnips and clover. The turnips and clover could be eaten by the livestock. In fact, the animals loved it. And these animals, you guessed it, they created more manure, lots of poo. It could be plowed into the soil, and again, we have that cyclical effect. Okay, all this stuff, of course, we take for granted these days. Yes, of course, you put manure on the ground, you put it into the soil, you're going to get good grass or you're going to get good crops. Well, this is stuff that had to be learned and had to be experimented with. Trial and error type stuff. And that's how people got better at farming, is they tried new things. This crop rotation was a new thing they tried. Now, farmers started to only let their best animals breed. This meant that you had even stronger, better, healthier animals that could do more work for people, that could help out more with transportation, and again, you guessed it, more poo, more manure. Now, all this crop growing and improvements in crops and more food, better food, allowed people to live longer. It also meant that people could create more people. All right, so we ended up having a population boom. More food plus better quality food, population boom. Okay, more people. Now, in this way, the agricultural revolution in England during the 1600s led directly to the Industrial Revolution because it helped provide healthier workers for the factories. All right, we're going to take a quick break from this lecture so far. So this ends the first section of part 1 of Industrial Revolution. Okay, part 2 will be next.